Young children receive continual feedback and corrections from their parents as they acquire their first language. And that's what allows them to make constant progress and eventually achieve linguistic proficiency. Similarly, as a student of a foreign language, you need constant corrections and feedback in order to make continual progress and eventually achieve mastery. That's one of the reasons that adult immigrants sometimes, often, stop making progress after they've reached a certain intermediate level. And even after decades of using their new language, they don't really get to an advanced level. Because social dynamics has it that they don't get corrected. Whereas children and teenagers do get corrected by their school teachers and by their peers. Sometimes they even get made fun of, but they're getting feedback. And so they make continual progress and almost invariably reach native or near native level of proficiency in their second language. Another vantage point from which to understand the fundamental importance of corrections to your speech in a foreign language is to consider deliberate practice, the framework of deliberate practice, which is a theory that was made popular by a seminal paper in 1993 written by an American psychologist from Florida State University, Erickson. And it became very influential in education, sports, and a variety of fields. And one of the things that this theory of deliberate practice states is that in order to master any skill, you need a lot of practice, for sure, many years of practice, but not any kind of practice. You need deliberate practice. And one of the pillars of that is getting feedback on your performance, getting corrected, and knowing immediately as you're performing the skill and practicing the skill whether your performance was accurate. So we can see, and this feedback, by the way, should come, generally speaking, from an expert, some kind of teacher. And we can see then exactly how this applies to conversation classes in a foreign language, right? Your expert is your native speaker, generally, who is a teacher. And as we said in the previous video, speaking is what brings language to life. And it's one of the four language skills. And everybody who studies a foreign language wants to learn how to speak, right? So you need conversation classes. As a matter of fact, speaking is the main reason to have a teacher and to hire a language course, because it's a skill that you can't really practice on your own. But it's not enough to just speak. It's not enough to just have spontaneous, enjoyable, or structured conversation with a teacher. You need continuous corrections in order to make continual progress and get to an advanced level, eventually really master the language. How should these corrections be given? Well, at Natural, we train our teachers to provide ideally efficient corrections by following 6 basic principles. They're very simple, and I'm just going to outline them here. So this serves for teachers, but also for students as criteria in order to assess whether your teacher is doing a good job in providing corrective feedback to you during conversation. So the first principle is correct often. Correct often. In nearly 20 years experience, I've never had a student complain to me that a teacher corrected too often. However, I've often had the opposite. Students who seem to intuitively or by experience know that they really need to be corrected a lot will say that, I like my teacher a lot, he or she is friendly, we have great conversation, but I need to change because I don't get corrected enough. So correct often. Second principle, time corrections according to student needs. And that means make the corrections as immediately as possible, as close to the mistake as possible, however, without stifling the flow of the student's speech. Okay, and that's going to depend on the student's level, personality, and your rapport with the student, how quickly you can make that correction. Number 3, make sure that your corrections are level appropriate. And that basically means don't correct points that are very advanced for that student's current level. Instead, focus on those mistakes, on those structures that need to be improved that are lower level, either below or at or slightly above the student's current level of proficiency. 4, encourage students to self-correct as much as possible. By doing so, you're going to foster metalinguistic awareness in the student and promote deliberate practice, that they have that attitude and that focus on constantly correcting themselves. 5, be sure students have understood and absorbed the corrections. So sometimes you really need to break that habit and you need to instill the right structures. And we often get somewhat carried away in conversation and don't really pay attention to correction. So make sure the student really gets the correction, absorbs it. And finally, register the most important of those corrections. And in the case of National, we do that in an app we call it the Lessons app. Now, this 6th point is so important for a couple of reasons. First, by registering the most important corrections and also the most important vocabulary that comes up, new vocabulary that comes up, both student and teacher can track those areas that the student really needs to prioritize. So maybe the corrections are often being around the present perfect. So then, again, the student and teacher know that they need to focus a bit on that grammatical structure. So the second reason it's so important is because for a student to really absorb, assimilate, internalize, and master any type of content, whether it be pronunciation or grammatical or semantic, they need to encounter it many times, multiple times. Once is never enough. And so review activities are critically important. They make the process of getting to the next level much more efficient. And by registering corrections that are context-based, based on the conversation that the student had with the teacher, you're providing ideal content for review activities. I'm going to talk a lot more about that in some upcoming posts. And so now, as usual, I want to invite you to put this theory into immediate practice. And the way you can do it is by recording an audio file of yourself speaking in the language that you're working on, be it English, French, Spanish, or Portuguese, 2 to 5 minutes talking on any subject, and then send it to me, and we'll get you a free correction by one of our native teachers. You can visit the print blog on our website to get a bit more information on that. So I hope you'll take advantage of that offer, and I'll see you next time.